Welcome to this episode of Sacred Templates in Search of the Monomyth. How does that sound? Kind of corny? Okay. All right, welcome back, everyone. I am still looking for identity here. Okay, this is going to be part 2, where I'm getting into a really incredibly in-depth analysis of the Enuma Elish, the Babylonian creation myth. I have found that it plays out in the psyche, and if you do so, if you play it out in this way, what it actually represents, or what it appears to represent, is the life of a human being. When we're born, how our life unfolds, how we wish to change it, interact with it later, and that all of the pieces and parts, the characters in the story that are all contained within there are parts of who and what we are at various times in our life. And I'm working on that theory and cross-referencing it with Genesis. I'm actually looking for, there's something in Genesis there that I don't recognize what it is. And I'm trying to figure it out. So I'm looking for examples of it elsewhere. So I've come back here to do this. I'll post a link below to the video 1. I've spent a lot of time setting up how this comes about in that one. And in this video, I'm going to jump right into just getting into the interpretation. But first, let's start with a review of what we did in the first video of where we covered. We were just barely into the tablet on the last one, so I'm going to go ahead and just start at the beginning here real quick and get us caught up. At a time when even the glories above had yet to be named, and unuttered was the word for the world which lay beneath. It was then that the first being Apsu, who was their source, and the progenitor Tiamat, the mother who gave birth to all, intermingled their waters, producing neither field nor marsh. At a time when no divine beings had yet come into existence, there were no names to be spoken and no fates pronounced. All right, before we continue on, what I'm going to do is introduce another tool here. I started looking at these and thinking, boy, it seems like there's a like a flow chart here or something like that. So that's what I did. I went ahead and I put together a flow chart. And I've worked out a kind of ahead of time, but let's just take it through as we go through in this case. Okay, you see we have Apsu and Tiamat up here, the source, the progenitor Tiamat, the mother who gave birth to them all. They intermingled their waters, producing neither field nor marsh. So far nothing was being developed at a time when no divine beings had yet come into existence. There were no names to be spoken and no fates pronounced. Right to the next step here, but the gods were given birth within those intermixing waves. So here we have our intermixing waves coming in. So the first of the gods that were given birth within those intermixing waves were Lamu and Lahamu. Their names were spoken, but once they had fully grown and become mature of form, then were born Anshar and Kishar, and they outshone them. Okay, let me stop and talk about this section right here. So we've got, first of all, gods, Lamu and Lahamu, first gods. Gods are going to be used as analogous terms to our first selves, our first qualities, our first characteristics, all of the things that we start out with in life. And the reason they're going to be called gods as the story goes along is the way that they're carrying it here is that our first, the first part of our life, eventually our characteristics, at some point we get so out of control that we want to go on a path and go back and take care of things. But those things are in charge of us when they act out. They are gods. They're given a god status right there. Different material is going to cover that in different ways. When we get over to Genesis, it's not going to be gods. It's going to be people who became evil and sinful and stopped following God. So we still have this group of negativity going on, which is actually analogous for our life and what we're accumulating and what we're attaching to. We're wiring ourselves based on our life experiences instead of stepping back from it and realizing the life experiences that we're watching and wiring ourselves from are physical manifestations of something that's in place. So we're wiring in a network of something that's just this machine running along, and we're a part of it until we realize that and step back and understand cause and effect and realize that everything that we are acting to in the physical world it's kind of like moving forward, facing backwards. You're acting and reacting to the final something else instead of changing the energy. Anyway, okay. So what we have right here is gods and all of that happening, and the Lamu and Lahamu, first gods, Anshar and Kishar, outshone parents. Look at the next step right there. I've got a clock in there. There's going to be time going by before the next one. And I keep saying Lamu and Lahamu is Adam and Eve before first sin, and I'm not quite sure if that's exactly what they're doing. It might be Anshar, and Kishar is who that is. What first sin isn't going to happen here like it does in the Bible. What's going to happen is that as life goes on, it's going to become more raucous. It's more in line with what a human life would be like. Okay, so again, the first were Lamu and Lahamu. Their names were spoken, but once they had fully grown and become mature of form, then they were born Anshar and Kishar. Somewhere in there is us, naked and ashamed and in the garden. It doesn't matter which one. We know that that's what they're that's what they're doing. And they outshone them. So whatever is coming along later is being stronger than our previous selves. And so many days passed by and many years were counted. There it is. Time goes by. Their first son was Anu, being as great as any of his forebears, and Anshar caused his son Anu to become just like himself. From Anu came Nudimmud, who was also his spitting image, and Nudimmud proved to be even greater than his forebears, profoundly wise and full of insight, with strength in his limbs, more infused with might than even his grandfather Anshar, with none among the gods who could be considered his equal. That generation of gods would gather together for wild revels, so they proved bothersome to Tiamat. Their hullabaloo echoed. All this commotion proved unsettling to Tiamat's inner being, and she was bothered by all of their activity within Anderuna. Anderuna is a dwelling place of the gods. Okay, so what's happening is various parts of us are being sliced up. This is our life unfolding, and as it unfolds, we become stronger and we become more knowledgeable. We become more in charge of this. We're like ourselves in the past, except that we are now stronger and we're different. We're bringing on more and more things. Yeah, just look at your life or the life of somebody else as a toddler that's obedient, or a child, maybe not a toddler, but there's a point where a child is obedient and then they're disobedient and then they're off on their own. And that's us going through life stages. And then time going by and we're interfacing with the world and we're becoming Anu, who has another part of him, Nudimmud, who, yeah, these are building things for the story in a storytelling culture, but they're all parts of us. And you can see along the flow there that it would easily replicate the flow of an individual's life. In fact, here we're also getting the idea that now that this noise, this raucousness is beginning, the peace is being lost. We can see there that somehow in the midst of this, the first sin has happened. First sin, and life continues to cycle painfully after you, is this right here, that this is very similar to what is going on. It's a little different, but think about it for a second. The gods are in Anderuna. The gods are your early characteristics. It's all the things that you once had that were joy and peace and all that sort of stuff that you're now losing. You're now losing those things. So up here where all of the gods reside in your mind, where all of those characteristics are, is no longer peaceful. That there's a lot of racket in the mind. It's very noisy. And Tiamat, our inner self, I think Tiamat is a little bit different. It's not so much just our subconscious, because Tiamat is going to have to be destroyed in this version of the story. I believe what Tiamat is our inner being, definitely ourself, but it represents the structure of our inner self, what we think, what we believe, what we feel. Not necessarily a separate entity, but an enclosure for everything, the earth, the world. Tiamat becomes our physical experience. And, possibly even framework would be a better term to use. If you can imagine, we start back in the beginning again, where you were not yet anything, and then put us someplace in the world and raise us, and we become that, and we believe that, and we think that is that structure right there, that is that Tiamat, that is who and what we become. And if that's the case, the story actually seems to work better. And that's why you would want to destroy the world to start over again. It's the same as a flood. All right, before we move on from here, I want to jump back to Genesis again, just to kind of do that side-by-side comparison here. If I go back, there's a couple of creation stories. These creation stories in Genesis are a lot different for different reasons than the creation. If we get down here to where the man and his wife were both naked and not ashamed, down here at the end of creation 2, we can see that there was a significant amount of story leading up to this, where in the Enuma Elish when we got to Lamu and Lahamu and their offspring there was a very short block in front of it. So what I'm going to do is just suggest that this is for Genesis. This has a whole different story over here. Something else is going on. But this represents creation, and right down here at the bottom, and that's where life begins. Sin began, we begin. What happens then is we become divided, and then we begin to go forth and multiply. We begin to divide out at that point. So that's what we have going on over in the Enuma Elish as well, that there are, this is building out. That's all. So we have things aligning up right now. Let's go back then to the Enuma Elish, pick it up where we are ready to, like, you know what, I just saw something here. This is conceptual again. Let's take Genesis. I didn't plan on this, but when it comes up, it pops up. The Genesis, the second creation story, just the first paragraph. There we go. In the day that the Lord God made the earth and the heavens, when no plant... Okay, so that's us. We are the earth and the heavens. In the day the Lord God made the earth and the heavens, our higher and lower being, our physical world and our mental world. When no plant in the field was yet in the earth, and no herb in the field had yet sprung up. So we've got nothing yet growing from our garden. For the Lord God had not caused it to rain upon the earth, we're not fertile yet, and there was no one to till the ground. But a stream would rise from the earth and water the whole face of the ground. Then the Lord God formed a man from the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living being. We just came into existence. We were just born. That would work. Yeah, think about it. It's a few steps away where we become man and woman and are naked in the garden. This right here is when we are in existence but not yet aware. Infancy. This is being born. At a time when the glories above had yet to be named. We have nothing in our consciousness yet, and unuttered was the word for the world which lay beneath. We didn't have anything stored away yet. It was then that the first being Apsu, who was their source, and the progenitor Tiamat, the mother who gave birth to all, intermingled their waters, producing neither field nor marsh. Nothing is growing yet. It's not fertile yet. At a time when no divine beings had yet come into existence. So this is early on. There were no names to be spoken and no fates pronounced. We had not begun to decide what our life experiences are, and we're not getting wrapped up in anything yet. But the gods were given birth within those intermixing waves. The first were Lamu and Lahamu. It's a duality, but they're the same thing. They're both, we're being born. That is our infant self there. So thinking through that, I'm currently then adjusting my understanding of these Lamu and Lahamu, I believe, is our physical and spiritual self before we have enough conscious awareness to start making our own, having our own fun experiences, where it's man by itself without the woman in the second Bible story. And this one, it's the duality of Lamu and Lahamu. And in the Bible, it leads very soon to Adam and Eve. And here it leads to Anshar and Kishar. And they outshone them. So the later selves were better than their first self. We were just, yay. I'm giggling because I'm getting tickled, but I'll never remember that. It's not enough computing horsepower in place yet. Okay, later on there is, though, and now life begins. So, yeah, okay. The more I look at it, the more I see that I think is probably what it looks like they're doing. Let's bring in a radically different cross-cultural comparison, or what people might think. This is the Tao Te Ching again, if anyone recognizes it. Let's just look at a couple of things. It says the Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. The Tao is the way. I'm going to tell you that's the way life flows, or the existence of things, how how everything is. The name that can be named is not the eternal one. So it's just this nebulous, anything emerges from there. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. But these become mental concepts. The unnameable is the eternally real. Naming is the origin of all particular things. This is us coming into existence as we are beginning to decide what something is. It is the origin of all particular things in my world, in my existence. If I hate that, if I like that, if I judge that, whatever it is, that becomes the origin of the particular thing that I am judging in my world right there. That is me coming online. Next line, free from desire, free from hanging on to that. You realize the mystery. As long as you're not grasping something or holding on to it or experiencing life with judgment, you realize the mystery. But if you're caught in that, holding on to it, you see only the manifestations. You see the things keep coming around in the physical world as a result of what you're holding on to. So you see in the beginning, really, here we have 4 or 5 lines that is their creation. It's not meant to try and carry it in an analogous manner that influences a population. It is being held in an analogous manner that tells the spiritual seeking student, here, this is what you must go figure out. Here, student, go forth and become one with the Tao, or however that works. You're supposed to unwrap this, but it's not carried in a vehicle that is a religion. It is carried in a vehicle that is a spiritual teaching. But they're both carrying the same teaching. The analogs shift. At some point, it doesn't matter. We're trying to unlock the story and look at the template. We know what the healing steps are and the big things are. We're just really having fun trying to pick it apart and see, does it align? And I think conceptually it does. Even if it's not step by step, sometimes it's like blocked by a couple of steps. I mentioned that there's differences in how they do it. All of the steps that are in Genesis, the 7 days, the things that are going to be in there, what they teach is actually things like cause and effect. The seed grows plant from seed. The same things keep cycling. That there are cycles, that they keep emerging that way. What else? There's duality. There's something else I don't recall, but at any rate, they're doing the same thing. They're going to cover the same things in the Enuma Elish, except instead of doing it in sections here, blocks, it's almost like instructions in Genesis. Here, it's going to be happening throughout. The 5 rivers in the second Genesis creation story are going to be 5 beams in Marduk's head right here. So we see that we're going to see that the parts are still in place, but here they're in a flow where they belong, and in the Bible it looks like they're put in steps. Here's how to do it. All right, I apologize for that going all over the place. I don't know if I'm still trying to figure it out, and I'm still trying to teach it, and I realize sometimes it's better to explain yourself by bringing a lot more into it. That's how I see it. I bring more into it, so that's how I show it. All right, let's get back to where we were then and just go along with the flow. Now that we kind of got that mentally set up, we're going to bring in a few more characters, and I'm going to encourage you as I read this and as we go through it to try to imagine that these are parts of you, your past, who and what you are, various parts of you that want to make a change, that resist the change, that are, actually that's not happening yet, but soon it will be. But start putting yourself into that mode of thinking that these are actually parts of you as we read it. All right, I'm going to back up just a little bit to get us back where we were, and they're talking about Nudamud, with none among the gods who could be considered as equal, that generations of gods would gather together for wild revels, so they proved bothersome to Tiamat. Their hullabaloo echoed. All this commotion proved unsettling to Tiamat's inner being, and she was bothered by all of their activity within Anderuna. There was nothing Apsu could do to mitigate their carousing, but there was nothing Tiamat would say to quiet them down, and no matter how troublesome their conduct became to her, regardless of how rowdy things were, she just put up with it. Okay, we'll talk about it again. We just have all of the gods in Anderuna, the place where all the gods reside, inside your mind. It's getting too crazy. Apsu can't settle it down. It's becoming too raucous. Apsu, our higher being, is also unable to do anything. He's summoned somebody now that we're going to bring somebody new into it. Regardless of how rowdy things were, she just put up with it. This kept up until divine Apsu, the source of the mighty gods, summoned to him and spoke to his officer Mumu, saying, Mumu, my trusted officer who I can rely upon, come with me and together we shall go speak with Tiamat. Okay, so I'm going to bring back my flowchart here, and we're going to add Mumu right down here. I'm not quite sure where Mumu belongs. Mumu emerges from out of nowhere, but Mumu, I think, is going to have to move along. So, and continue on without being a part of the past. So I'm going to put Mumu right here. Mumu is going to be somebody who is working in conjunction with Apsu to try and work with Tiamat to settle down all of the gods that have been offspring from just life experiences. Okay, since Mumu showed up, I just wanted to get him there on the flowchart. Let's continue on here. Where were we? I'll just start back on this. Regardless of how rowdy things were, she just put up with it. This kept up until divine Apsu, the source of the mighty gods, summoned to him and spoke to his officer Mumu, saying, Hear me, Mumu, my trusted officer who I can rely upon. Come with me and together we will go speak with Tiamat. Thus they went together and seated themselves before Tiamat, and they conversed with her about their children, the gods. Apsu raised his voice to be heard, speaking heartily to Tiamat. I have been very troubled by the manner of their conduct, so that I cannot relax during the day nor sleep well at night. Therefore I shall bring it to a halt and get rid of them all. Then silence shall reign, and thus we might get some sleep. But as soon as Tiamat heard his words, she became incensed. Overcome with ire, she screamed intensely at her husband, but then she soothed the fury that raged within her breast. All right, go back to a time in your own life, way back when you're sitting there looking at your life and going, what the hell happened? What happened? I can't do this. I can't live like this. I'm going to change. I'm going to make changes. I'm not going to do this again. And you grab your resources and you go tell yourself inside, I'm done. I'm not doing that anymore. I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. I'm quitting that. All of it. I'm finished with it all. And a week later, you're back to it all. You see that unfolding here? It's going to be representing our struggle to leave the past behind, that there's something that is coming after us, that it's fighting us, that it's a difficult thing to do. And we know that, and it's going to, it'll emerge. It's a very important part of the path. It's incredibly real. I talked about the emergence of that in Genesis, and again, these are conceptual things. You can't look at the words in the stories. You have they're concepts like this. A wheel goes around and round. A tree grows up, and even though you chop it down, it grows up again, and it gets chopped down. The stone gets rolled up to the top of the hill, but before it can get there, it rolls back down, and you must go do it again, and then it happens over and over again. All of those conceptually are showing a repeated process that needs to be interrupted somehow or can't be interrupted. That's what I mean by conceptual. We're looking for something like that in the teaching. It's encoded in that way. So I say that just to set up the idea that Eve's punishment is exactly that in Genesis, when Eve is told to, you are now kicked out of the Garden of Eden, and it's part of the punishment. There's a few things, and when I do Genesis, I'll get in more detail on that. But Eve we're looking at is our inner being, our subconscious. The offspring is what we have stored inside of us that we've got put away, and as long as it continues to act out, it's going to be painful, and it's going to continue to increase over time. It's going to go forth and procreate. So this is conceptually, they're all in here. Okay, so what is actually is happening right now is the beginning of, in Genesis, when the world begins to become bigger and it begins to sin and turn away. That's what's happening at this part of the story right here. This one's going to get a little bit longer and show some repeated action. Okay, remember Tiamat had just smote her breast and then decided to reason after her anger. Could we permit our own offspring to be thus eradicated? Despite their troublesome ways, we ought to put up with it. Then the officer Mumu provided his own answer to Apsu. But he spoke at odds with the advice of his mother, the earth. Look at that right there, his mother, the earth. So Mumu is offspring also of Tiamat, and she is the earth. She is our life. She is the way we exist. Father, you ought to put an end to their annoying behavior, that one might relax during the day and sleep well at night. Apsu was in full agreement with what he had said, and satisfied with thoughts of devising vile plans for his sons, the gods. His officer Mumu put his arms around him, hugging him, and fell down at his knees and enthusiastically kissed him. Yet what they planned was conveyed to their sons, the gods, for they heard everything and were troubled, pacing about. They all grew quite quiet and sat around without speaking until the god with the gift of wisdom and understanding, Ea, the god who is insightful, recognized their intentions, and he formulated a solution for it all, planning it out well. He concocted it with superlative skill. His spell was perfect, for when he chanted it, he calmed the turbulent waters, and abounding sleep overcame Apsu. He became pacified. He caused him to enter a deep sleep, steeped in tranquility, while the officer Mumu, his adviser, was left in a trance. Then Ea removed his belt and took his crown from his head, and took his mantle of brilliance and dressed himself in it. Then he forced Apsu down under his feet and crushed him, and bound Mumu, lying him down over him crosswise. Then he established his own residence on top of the Apsu, and he then took Mumu, holding him by a nose leash. And after he had subdued and then killed all of his foes, then Ea raised the declaration of victory over his adversaries. Then he could rest easy within his own personal chambers, and these he named Apsu, and established temples there, making it his home. Ea lived in luxury with his wife Damkina, there in the house of fate, there in the hall of purpose. Then the Lord came, who among all was the most judicious. There within the watery Apsu did Marduk take his shape. Within the unsullied waters of the Apsu was Marduk born. From his father Ea, his mother Damkina gave birth to him. He was suckled on the milk of the goddess's own breasts, and she who breastfed him embodied him with excellence, so that he had a lofty stature. The look of his eyes was intense. Okay, let's stop right there before I get too far ahead. We've just introduced a couple of characters, so I want to update that flowchart, and then let's talk about some of the things that were covered here. Most of it is pretty easy to see, but there's a few specific things I just want to talk about. So first of all, we bring the flowchart back up, and then we're going to add Ea, who is insightful, and Damkina, the wife. We're keeping the duality. There's always a male and a female at each step along the way. That is, except for Anu sitting back there, huh? We still have mysteries. We'll keep picking at it. Something will show up. And that is the latest iteration of who and what we are that became... Ea was the one that took over. Ea is the one that shut down Apsu and put Apsu down and put Mumu, the advisor, over the top of him. So Ea took over. However, look at Ea and Damkina gave offspring to who? Marduk. Marduk is going to be called. Marduk is the hero on the hero's journey. We become Marduk if we're going on the path. Okay, so where we are is this idea that the whole mind is crazy. We want to go resolve it. The past fights back and wins, actually, and takes over. This is when this is happening here. The Mumu, the advisor, getting the ring nose. Mumu's going to be moving along, but Ea other things get destroyed, and the deep sleep happens in tranquility. There's a belt and crown from his head, and the mantle of brilliance, and dressed himself in it. Then he forced Apsu down under his feet and crushed him. So he is taking over as the powerful one. I am the king. I am taking over. It's not the final iteration yet. There is going to be more to come, but that is what is happening so far. And let's see, he's leading Mumu by a nose leash. That means our past is taking our values and saying, yeah, we're in charge. I'm in charge right now. You're not in charge. You don't have the strength or the courage to stand up, so I got this. And he erased the declaration victory, personal chambers, and he called Apsu. So he's got his own place that he's calling his own place there. Apsu temples, making it his home, living there in luxury with his wife Damkina. They're in the house of fate. They're in the hall of purpose. So instead of it being relaxed, this is where everything is coming from. And that's not always a good thing. It's not a good thing. But now we also have the emergence of Marduk from that very same thing. So there are parts of us then that are actually emerging as we're going along in life that are going to eventually get to a point where we go, yeah, I've had it this time. We're not there yet, but this part of us is being built that is going to be the person that goes back and does that. So here is our hero self, Marduk. Yay. All right, let's move on. You know what? I got to say something that this is where there's going to be a significant difference too. I forgot to mention that. This is a significant difference between this and what's going to emerge later as the monomyth. That this right here is where the monomyth would normally pick up wherever the calling is, but there's still things that have to be unwrapped. The cycles, how things work, all of that stuff is going to still be a part of this. So it's almost as if creation and then the calling have kind of this integration between the two. So, yeah, it's a little bit different, but again, it's really old. It's beautiful. It's the precursor. I'm sure actually there was precursors to this that didn't survive. Okay, at this time, let's focus on our hero and see what we have. Marduk. Then the Lord came, who among all was the most judicious. There within the watery Apsu did Marduk take his shape. You see, Apsu is still there. Within the unsullied waters of the Apsu was Marduk born. So somewhere there's a pure place, unsullied, where Marduk came from. From his father Ea, his mother Damkina gave birth to him. He was suckled on the milk of the goddess's own breast, and she who breastfed him embodied him with excellence. So he's going to be an excellent person, so that he had a lofty stature. The look of his eyes was intense, mature from the very first, and mighty even at a young age. These are spiritual, or we turn these inwards, they're analogous. That doesn't mean we're big people that have, all this kind of, it doesn't mean that. What it means is that we have an intensity and that we see things and that we're looking for truth and reality. When his grandfather Anu looked upon him, he was glad. His face shone greatly. His heart was exceedingly pleased. So perfect that his head was twice as lofty as any other god. Let's stop for a second. Who's Anu again? That was the Anu, the one we talked about, the sun by itself, huh? The one that doesn't have a male and female counterpart. So interesting, because Nudimmud is same as Anu. So those are like brothers, aren't they? Like twins, except one is stronger. And that's the one that goes on to do stronger things. Anu is the grandfather that is proud of Marduk, so Anu must be the good qualities that came through, and Nudimmud the bad qualities. The division is happening there. Perhaps that. And later on we might get back to Anu as a lineage of something positive. We'll keep an eye out for it. We'll keep looking at things and picking them out. Anomalies. If we go back and look at that time, that would actually make sense. If you see that after the passage of time, there was Anu and Nudimmud were the two that were out the other side. Anu was the sun, and Nudimmud, both of them came from the same source, but Nudimmud was stronger. And even then, yeah, that's the stronger one. And of course, that's the one that goes off on to give birth to Ea and Damkina. Those are the offspring of the bad side, the male and female part that are going to branch off into more, just part of the story. But our good self, Anu, son, that was our good self after the passage of time, after we were exposed to life. All right, let's get back to the text. When his grandfather Anu looked upon him, he was glad. His face shone greatly. His heart was exceedingly pleased. Okay, so this is a part of our self that's looking at another part of ourself going, yay, I'm glad I am relieved. So perfect that his head was twice as lofty as any other god. Rising high above them, he was better by every measure. Both his arms and legs were well formed beyond comparison, so that it could not be fathomed, almost incomprehensible. Moreover, he possessed 4 ears to hear and 4 eyes to see. Red flames leapt forth whenever he opened his mouth. So to me what this does is it invokes the image of enhanced awareness, sensitive people. There's a few called, and there's some qualities and characteristics that show up here and there throughout the material. This is one of the places that it actually does show up. As far as the 4 ears and the 4 eyes, well, that's weird. What does that mean? Are you the kind of person that, like, you're just more aware of your surroundings than other people? You see a bigger field. You understand and feel a larger place. You see and understand and comprehend more than the average person. You look at it and go, God, you don't see that. Here's one that I experience because I believe I fit in this category here, but I can't disconnect from my environment. I struggle if there's noisy or raucous places. I can't shut it off, while other people are like, why don't you just ignore it? And you're like, oh my God, it's like it's inside your head. There's something that we're wired differently. You can't disconnect from it. You can't be there. It's not your place to be. We're introverted and belong on the outskirts, keeping a bigger eye on things. I think that's all there is to it. Red flames leap forth whenever you open your mouth. I'm always polite and kind here. But when people come at you and go, oh yeah, you're full of it, I will shut them down so fast. I will have flames. I don't play it. I don't debate with people that don't have anything. I'm very confident with what I have. I think that might be parts of what we're looking at here. There's nothing special about us. There's something different about the personality, I think, that of the person that does this, perhaps. His 4 ears were also considerable, of a luminous size, as were his eyes, which were capable of perceiving anything. Being unsurpassed among the gods of exceptional build, having limbs which were mighty, and a body terrifically tall. Then Anu cried, Mariutu, my son, you are king of the gods, dressed in a shining robe fit for 10 gods, rising beyond him. There were 5 almighty beams which surmounted his head, and Anu invented the 4 winds, and then fashioned them. Okay, first I want to make my Genesis comparison there. The Noah, the monomyth calling here. We're building up everything from Marduk as far as his size and all of that kind of stuff. Let's see what they do here. Okay, so as we get into Jewish material and they're doing the calling, Noah found favor in the sight of the Lord. Noah was a righteous man, blameless in his generation. Noah walked with God. Let's see, down here's another one. Then the Lord said to Noah, go into the ark, you and all your household, for I have seen that you alone are righteous before me in this generation. So the calling there, it looks a lot different, doesn't it, than the calling that they have here. There's other things that are going to be happening, though. And again, this is now in Genesis, we just stepped into the monomyth and we left the creation myth. However, here we're kind of still going back and forth between the two. Creation is still going on at the same time that we are creating Marduk, or our self that we're going to go back, our hero self. Here's exactly how it works. It can be a scary transition for some people. Some people are okay with it. Some people don't want to touch it. Here's the reality. God is your higher being. God is Ea. God is this right here. And whoever is connected with that is a chosen person. So if you are standing upright in the eyes of God, that means you are somebody who is naturally connected with your higher being. Okay, what are these 5 beams? There were 5 almighty beams which surmounted his head. Now, these I'm going to suggest are going to come into play in a couple of places. I'm going to describe what they are. They're going to emerge in other areas, not that commonly. The Gospel of Thomas, there's 5 trees in paradise. Something about that. Paradise is up here, 5 trees. There's 5 beams in the head. In Genesis, creation story number 2, there's 5 rivers. There's one that comes from Eden and flows out of the garden, and then there's 4 that head out from there for 5 total. And what these are going to represent, this is a mental process, and we flow in the universe. One of those rivers is the way we flow in life, like the Tao, or just how your life works. Is it generally good, generally bad? How do things happen throughout the day for you? That is the way you flow in life. And that flow direction and quality is going to be dictated by the things that we're holding up here. So the 5 mental parts that we're going to be using and the material, the stories are written in such a way to employ these 5 parts. We've got the higher being. That's where our Apsu is and all of our higher beings come from. We've got the consciousness. This is where all of the parts of us are built that are making choices along the way they're making bad choices and eventually going to be making good choices. There are qualities that we hold inside of us. In this case, they've got Tiamat being held as our inner quality with lots of other people inside of there that are alter parts of who and what we are at various times. I like that. I don't like that. I should do that. I'm not going to. I quit. Okay, I give in. All of those are just parts of what these stories contain. This one isn't even that rich. It doesn't have that many parts in it. It still looks complicated, but that's what the 5 beams in paradise are, 5 mental states. There's actually 5 mental states, and the 5th one is the one that we flow in. It's the quality of the flow, the way we feel emotionally and the way life works. The 4 winds, this is different. This is going to emerge in this material. This is going to come as time to kind of wipe things out. You want to blow winds from all directions. From all directions, what the implication here is not that the wind is blowing from all directions, but that you're looking at a situation from all directions. When we're trying to heal, typically what happens is we've got something put away that we're not looking at, we don't see, we don't want to see it, we don't want to deal with it. And in the very act of doing that, it actually gives it more strength, it makes it powerful, it makes it act out. It doesn't hide away, it comes out and it emerges through actions that, the right people can observe that there's something behind what is going on and see that there's something motivating it. So as part of the healing process, one of the things that we do is to look at what hurt us. I got molested. I don't want to look at that. You got to look at it. Pretend I am being molested. Pretend I'm watching me being molested. Pretend I am the molester. Pretend I am the father of the molester or the mother of the molester. You begin looking at things in a way that is incredibly difficult. Really difficult. But you know what? The human adjusts. The things that we still don't want to look at it, but we don't want to be hurt by it. Not looking at it keeps it in a very hurtful state. Looking at it makes it so that it ceases to hurt until we can disconnect from it and go, let it go. I'm no longer emotionally attached to it anymore. That's the 4 winds. So we're starting to build things up inside of here that you can see that the 5 beams right now, those are the 5 rivers in paradise, the first part of Genesis. So they're all being put in here as what to do and how you're going to need to use the material and how your mind works. They're just put in a little bit different locations. Okay, let's move on to the next one. In reference to the winds, these he set in Marduk's hand, saying, "Free them, my son." Then he formed dust and caused the tornado to bear it away. Then he invented the tidal swell, which aggravated Tiamat, and Tiamat was agitated and unsettled both day and night. The gods, meanwhile, were distressed and forced to endure. Okay, there's a couple of things happening right here that I think are important. Number one, it's just showing more agitation. For us on the path, we're looking at that going, yeah, this is us struggling along the path. All right, we sure draw that out, don't we? Remember, there's a population of people that are carrying this story that are never going to look at the template. They need something to hang on to. What they're there's inventive stuff in here, some strange things that are part of their culture. It's long ago. We don't know exactly how much they believed the creatures were real or how much they were fantasy, myth, or whatnot. But we know that in their culture, it is a storytelling culture, and that these are going to be more rich than they need to be for a self-healing. And I think that a lot of the elements that we can see in here are very much a part of that helps carry the story. It helps make it fun, and it makes it interesting. At the same time, it's carrying something in there. There's a lot of detail in there saying, yeah, you're going to struggle. You're going to have a tough time. In the meantime, in their culture, they see dust devils and wind blowing and stuff, all kinds of things going. This would connect them with the story and their environment in a way that I think would be very rich. All right, I'm going to keep reading on and keep imagining as we're going along that this is playing out inside of us, that there's this internal struggle, this build-up to go back and take our inner self, and the struggles to do it and the failures that we have along the way, that those are unfolding somehow, nested in these stories, teaching us something, that we're going to see struggles emerge that seem to be along that human line. So with vile thoughts on their minds, and we're talking about the gods there that are all stressed out about the preparation to come and get them. So with vile thoughts on their minds, they spoke to Tiamat. Because at the time that they killed your husband Apsu, and you failed to stand by his side, but rather sat by silently, thus did Anu invent the 4 strong winds and tidal swell, so as to intentionally agitate you, so that we have no peace. Did you not hold your husband Apsu within your heart? And likewise, the officer Mumu, who was also captured. It's not surprising you're forsaken. Are you not a mother? You are unsettled both day and night, but look at our plight. Are we not distressed? Have a heart. Do you not care for us? Look, we lack strength in our limbs, and our eyes are hollow. Free us from this distressing burden that we might get sleep. Raise the war cry, make them pay for what they have done, destroy this enemy, eradicate him entirely off the earth. Tiamat listened to what they said, and she agreed with them. Yes, I think that we ought to do just as you suggested. So we have all of our evil parts arguing with our other parts, our whoever's in charge, our Tiamat, is giving in and saying, okay, yeah, Tiamat's the one running in the background now. When the conscious mind isn't thinking and making decisions and actively engaged in something, and we're just going throughout the day, we're on autopilot. That is Tiamat. When we're consciously involved in things, that's, I believe, perhaps the other part of it. Somehow it shifts in there. Every tree that grows comes from a seed. Every manifestation in the physical world comes from an energy within. This is the process that we're looking at here, a physical and an energy-driven. The energy drives the physical. The physical is the experience. In the male, the female drives it. So it sounds like, oh, these female are messing us up. What's going on? Wow, we got to unwrap those analogs. We're all having the same experience. But, to get back to that one, it almost sounds like that they're pleading with Tiamat to eradicate the bad guys, that, you've already killed Apsu and things like that. Aren't you holding something in your heart? It sounds like they are, like these are our inner qualities, our love, our joy, the things that we had as children, as youngsters, that as life unfolded, we lost them. And this is a part of us asking, can't we get that back? Can't we get rid of these things that hurt us? Okay, there's a couple of ways that can be looked at. When we're trying to heal, we look at it in every possible way. What is it that hurts you? That's what we're going after. Simple. But if that was all there was to our media, that would not be a fun channel to watch. We want big stories. I got all day here, and I got a healthy, active mind. Yeah, give me something besides ants to watch. I want to talk a little bit about structures and towers, temples, things like that come about in these stories. that all of them are constructs. If you can imagine your life, think about this. When you first start, you're nothing. Your life begins. There's, the seeds of light of your experience are being planted at that time, metaphorically. The experiences that you're having emotionally and memory are beginning to dictate the way you're going to go on and look at life and view life and emotionally think life is, and you're going to begin feeding into that, and it's going to lead to another thing, to another thing, to another. It's going to get bigger and bigger. That's the structure right there that's being built, and those could be good temples or bad temples, or it could be a field, it could be a land, it could be the earth, it could be the world, it can be any analogous term like that, which is meant to hold something that has become bad, that needs to be destroyed, but they all play out as that structure of you. My earlier self was my world. I need to drown it out and start over. My earlier self became Jericho. I need to tear it down and get rid of the evil. All of those, again, conceptual. Yeah, that's the part. Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to pass that along as we're going through and we're seeing temples and people living in temples and things like that. That's what that's referencing. It is they're living within this. This is becoming me. This is my existence. This is basically who and what I am. This is my temple. What does it look like from the outside? Here's a fun one. When you have stories like Greek myth, for example, or a few other places, one that's going to take you across the world or across the universe. That is your world, your universe. When you go across it, it's taking you to the beginning of yourself, your own existence. All right, the gods who dwell within the Apsu will suffer great misery. Let's stop it for a second. The gods who dwell within the Apsu. So they're talking about the Apsu being at a source to begin with, then being destroyed, but still being there, still providing. Apsu seems to be something that is something that continues to supply. Cosmos, background, For they choose to do evil to those gods that gave them birth. And they gathered about and stood in proximity to Tiamat. They were brutal and planned endlessly, both day and night, grumbling and fumbling, all done in the cause of making war. Okay, so there you have that part, the second line, for they choose to do evil to those gods that gave them birth. For they choose to do evil to those gods that gave them birth. So the gods that gave them birth were the original human qualities. Our love, our innocence. Those were the original gods. But now the gods who dwell within the Apsu are doing evil to those gods. We gave them... Yeah, okay. Yeah, we're just going bad. That's it. It's wonderfully written. I think it's fun to try to extract that out of there, and I hope that I'm right. Well, regardless, let's have fun. They called together a council of war to consider battle plans. Lady Huber, who made all, produced an unfailing weapon. She brought big snakes with piercing teeth and vicious fangs. Their bodies she had infused with poison rather than blood, and she caused these raging dragons to emit deadly beams and to wear mantles of brilliance so that they were like gods. Then the Lady Huber raised her voice, verbalizing the curse. Anyone who gazes at them will be stricken down with horror. They will always raise up their bodies and never back down. All right, let's stop and talk about this one for a second. Lady Huber arrives out of nowhere. She's not tied to any place. She doesn't seem to be an offspring from anyone. She just appears as some sort of an entity that can have some sort of power to create and call into power some sort of demonic creatures. So what would that mean to us? Okay, well, one thing I do want to talk about is that as they're calling in specific creatures like that, there's probably something in their culture that creature means something. That it spits fire or it does something. If you get into Hermetic work, they're going to be using verbiage like transmutation, which is going to be meant to change the frequency of something that is hurting. Of course, it's a stone and all that. It's carried in the same way. Forgiveness, transmutation. Same thing. Taking something that hurt and making it not hurt anymore, which then changes your life. So there are going to be things that they're using as analogs that I don't know what they are. Blood inside of a creature. We can see that in a few places it looks like by draining the blood out of something, you take away its life. You can see this in Leaving the Island of the Old Gods and Jason and the Argonauts, where they're draining the fluid out of the giant, the bronze giant that's after them, or in Cain and Abel, in the blood being drained into the ground. You can see it here. So there's going to be things that they're using back in their culture at that time that is going to mean something to them that I don't know what they mean exactly. But I do know that it means that they're going to be some sort of tools, musical instruments. Oh, you can use that to change frequencies, things like that. So you can use a good chef to cook something good, to feed somebody something good. Lulling something. There's different ways to carry the idea that you need to quell the past, to tame the demons, to change the frequency that is driving it. All of that kind of stuff is in here. So I believe that is probably what is happening in here, as well as some things that are probably obvious if we look at them. You know what, in talking this through and not really fully understanding it, I came to realize something. If we look at this again, down near the bottom in parentheses here, then the Lady Huber raised her voice, verbalizing the curse. Anyone who gazes at them will be stricken down with horror. They will always raise up their bodies and never back down. There goes another hole in the drywall. Then the Lady Huber raised her voice, verbalizing the curse. Anyone who gazes at them will be stricken down in horror. There goes the back door off the hinges. They will always raise up their bodies and never back down. Those creatures become rages. You know why Lady Huber is not an offspring of anyone? She is rage. Lady Huber is our rage. This is a long video, but oh my gosh, there's just a lot unfolding, so I'm going to keep going here. Now, as we get into this, Kingu is going to appear. Make sure to look at Kingu as your early self, at your angriest self before going on the journey. This is the part that acts out the worst. As I keep thinking about it and trying to place the parts, it almost seems like this, like Kingu is going to be the person that acts out when it hits the fan. We become Kingu. When we're not Kingu, and Kingu isn't having to act out and fight and take charge of things, but Kingu is ultimately the one that's going to be put in charge of everything. But when Kingu isn't acting out, who's acting out is the gods. And both Kingu and the gods and everything else resides within Tiamat, and Apsu is what continually supplies everything, the cosmos. Then Tiamat enlisted a horned snake, a Mashusu dragon, a Lamu hero, an Ugalu devil, a mad dog, and scorpion man, brutal Umu devils, a half-man, half-fish, a half-man, half-bull, carrying ruthless weaponry and who reveal no fear in battle. Her commands were so portentous that none could be ignored. In addition to these, she recruited 11 more likewise. And above all of her children, of the gods who had assembled, she conferred upon King U, the chief rank amongst them all, bestowing the generalship of her army and rule of the Congress, to hold aloft the spear, to signify battle, to gather the warriors. She had given him high command of the entire combat force, and placed him to be seated upon the throne of rule, saying, I have conjured a spell in your name, making you foremost among the gods of Congress. You now rule all of the gods. You will reign supreme, for further, you will be my soulmate. Your orders shall not be disregarded among the Anuki. She conveyed to him the tablet of fate, clasping it at his chest. What you say will not be altered, and you will speak the law. So after King U had received his rank, been given Anu power, and had pronounced the fates of his sons the gods, he said, "What comes from out of your lips would obliterate flames. Your potent poison would serve to incapacitate the mighty." Okay, you're going to watch me make adjustments in my understanding as we move along. Lady Huber, I don't think Lady Huber is our rage. I think that Kingu and the gods actually become our rage. Lady Huber just brought something into existence, and then I think disappears. Okay, so I know the video's getting long, but there's a couple of things happening, and I want to make sure not to just glaze over them. And I know that there's more than I can even see and unwrap yet. So what I have so far is you see a couple of things. Number one, Lady Huber called it into existence, and then Tiamat used it. So you'll see that something first has to be created before it can be used. In the Bible, we might see that in creation on the, I don't recall what day, 5, 6, when the trees came about, that first God said, "Let it happen," and then the earth responded and it did happen. So we see the same kind of a process there where something is called into existence and then it comes into existence. That's a part of the process. That's naming things. That's calling things. That's creating things. Once we decide something, it comes into existence. Naming is the origin of all particular things. We are creating our existence. Okay, so that's teaching us that part right there. We create what it is that we have. We call it into being. It wasn't there. We weren't born with it. We call it into being later on in life, and we begin to employ it for other reasons. It's a learned behavior. What else do we have? Kingu is our earlier self. Kingu's been given the plate, here's the tablet. Here's how things are going to rule. These are the rules. You get charge of it, however it happens. So that's a point in time we're living life like, hey, leave me alone. I know what's going on. You don't know what my life is like. We haven't gotten to the point where, we're tough. We're angry, we're many other things, or we're afraid, we're scared, we're somehow something that is not what we would call happily functional in life. And that any of our conditions that we go through in life experiences, our mental processes bring us there. So these don't have to be all bad things. Sometimes maybe you weren't abused. Maybe you just think you're worthless. There's all kinds of reasons that we might want to choose to use the material to feel better. It's not always abuse. Sometimes it's just, I realize I can have a better life. I can do something like that. It's not always about, healing from some tragedy. It's a life-changing process. And at this stage, what we're seeing in the story at the end of Tablet 1 here is that we have officially become our first selves. We're going to go on and begin battle at this point, but we have created a few components here that we're going to be using as we move on through the story. We've got a hero in place. We've got ourselves in place. I want to pull up this chart again and look at this one more time. There we go. We got Apsu, Sky Mind, Tiamat, Earth, Physical Realm. That's the beginning where at first there's nothing. We emerge from nothing. But there's intermixing waves in there. Somehow in the background of the cosmic intermixing, Lamu and Lahamu, first gods appear. I am now convinced that is not our Adam and Eve self. That is when we are first born. That's our infant selves. And Anshar and Kishar are born from them and shown the parents. Sin hasn't happened, so I'm looking at Anshar and Kishar as actually the logical step in what Adam and Eve are, that this would be the part of us that is now we're stronger than our earlier selves. And at any rate, yeah, that's it. Okay, the passage of time goes on. Life goes on. Anshar and Kishar have got to the point where they have the mental capacity. We are at that point in time where we are now able to discern life's experiences and process them and begin storing them. Lamu and Lahamu were infant. We couldn't do that yet, although we probably were in the background. But as far as our memory and what we interact with, that's what it starts at the Anshar and Kishar and the passage of time. And then what do we have? Anu and Nudimmud. This is almost looking like we move on from there, and this is the Cain and Abel split. There's two possibilities, except one of them goes on to actually do bad and good. It takes over from the first self. It's What is nudiment is like a value. I'm not sure, a value system. Insightful. At any rate, so nudiment is like our clever early selves. I'll talk myself into this. Yeah, don't worry, we'll be okay. Something like that. But that also gives birth to our later self. And unlike in Cain and Abel, where one of them is killed, this one is left there. But it's odd. Yeah, you can see something is happening and transitioning there. Anyway, I just wanted to say that I see those comparisons. And then one more thing, of course, is we've introduced a couple of new names here. King U, early self, is in charge. I don't know what block to put that in. This is somebody that's going to come and go. This is the person that's in charge of everything. So I'm not quite sure how to put them in. And the Anuki, that term just showed up. And it sounds like they're using that as the gods, that suddenly the gods are the Anuki. I'm not comfortable with that. Where did that name come from? Where did it show up? It comes from other places. It's okay that they're using it as that. I just realize that it's part of a bigger network and that name comes elsewhere. We know names like Anuki, Anunnaki, fallen angels, watchers. All of those are going to be analogs for the same thing. Those are the gods. Those are the previous selves that became corrupt and need to be gone. At any rate, I just put those up here on the flowchart. I should end this video. Just because it got so long. I'll get into the next tablet, and I'm sure there's 100 things I've overlooked. Probably things throughout there you spotted and went, you didn't see that. Yay, I hope you do. All right. Okay. I think that kind of summarizes what we have going on, right? We are okay with that. We were born. We came into being. Time goes by. We're now decaying. We're becoming our earlier selves that are, what is that saying again? I've used it a couple of times. Everybody has two lives. And the second one begins the moment we realize we only have one life. So we're going back to try and fix things, right? Okay. Hope this made sense. Hope it was interesting. And I'd love to hear comments or questions, ideas, thoughts in the comment section. Love one another, and I'll see you in the next installment where we're going to start on tablet number 2.